Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. My name is Melanie Campbell, President and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and convener of the Black Women's Roundtable. And welcome to our monthly Black Women Leaders Power Table. And boy, do we have a powerhouse of sisters lined up for you today. Our focus for this month's Power Table is voting rights and economic justice. And yesterday's election, boy, was that something. And so we will have some analysis from a national perspective about what happened in Virginia and New Jersey. But we also will have leaders from the states who will provide their perspectives. So stay tuned. I am also glad to partner with the National Council of Negro Women with my sister, Janice Mathis, Esquire, who is Executive Director of the National Council of Negro Women, who will join us. And I want to also thank Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, who will be our moderator for the hour for this couple of hours today. As we all know, last night we saw the election in New Jersey and Virginia governor's races. That many times people say after a presidential election, those governor's races, those state races, give you an idea of what is going to happen in 2022. So we'll give you a little perspective about that. But also, as we continue to fight for our voting rights and also economic justice, here in Washington, D.C., we've been going with the Black Women's Roundtable, NCNW, and many other organizations fighting to get the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act passed and the Freedom to Vote Act passed and the Build Back Better and infrastructure bills passed. We'll have some conversations about that. But I will move now to introduce you all to our co-host of the hour, my sister Janice Mathis. Janice?
Good evening or good afternoon. Thank you so much, Melanie Campbell and Black Women's Roundtable, for convening this Power Table Talk on behalf of Dr. Janetta Betts Cole and all the 330 chapters of the National Council of Negro Women around the United States. We're delighted to be your partner in this effort. I don't want to take long, but I do want to say that a friend once told me, you can't let your politics drive your message. Your message needs to drive your politics. As I think about the races in Virginia and New Jersey yesterday, I'm reminded that voters know what inspires them. And those of us who would encourage voters have to understand what galvanizes them. We know that door-to-door contact works and text messaging works. These races have political implications, but it also has concerns that should rise above politics. We can't make the mistake to think that political concerns outweigh the messages that are being delivered. This is definitely a time when message must drive politics. Voters vote when something they care about is threatened. Think about President Obama's second term in office. That was a time of very, very high turnout. For some voters, the desire simply to replace the previous president, Trump, galvanized voters. We know what the messages are. The voters want HBCU funding. They want Pell Grants. They were promised environmental protection. They want assistance with child care. They want paid family leave. The voters know that they want and they need criminal justice reform. They need comprehensive protection of voting rights. And when they don't get those messages, then we should not be surprised that voters are less than enthusiastic. So today I know we're gonna have experts help us walk through all of this. But again, I want to say to the Black Women's Roundtable and specifically to Melanie Campbell, thank you for convening this Power Table Talk. National Council of Negro Women, ncnw.org, is proud to be part of the effort.
Thank you, my sister Janice. And I know that you all have a busy week ahead with the National Council of Negro Women with your assembly. So we're looking forward to joining you. Now we will turn it over to my sister leader, our moderator for the hour and a half or so. My sister, Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, President and CEO of Insight Unlimited LLC, and board member for the National Council of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. And Avis, so we're looking so forward to having you moderate this conversation. That's very, very important. There's a lot at stake, and we may end up having a couple of surprise guests, Avis, on today. So we'll put it in the chat to let you know if we end up with a couple more surprise guests. Thank you. Avis, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Melanie. How you doing, girl?
I'm good, girl. We survived last night. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
We survived to fight another day.
I'm not a panelist, so I'm going to hold my thoughts for my closing at the end.
I hear you. Well, wonderful to see you and wonderful to have the honor.
Some folks tried to tell you, girl.
Well,
some
people have to learn the hard way. That's all I have to say. Okay.
About that. So I'll turn it over to you. And we may have a couple of extra guests that show up, and we'll let you know.
Sounds good. I will keep my eye on the chat. All righty. Hello there, ladies. I am so excited to moderate this power talk around how Black women feel and what Black women want around voting rights and economic justice. This is such a powerful and dynamic conversation that we have scheduled for you today, because we have powerful and dynamic sisters that you will be hearing from all afternoon long to really share with you their perspectives on what happened yesterday and what they foresee in terms of the future. Okay. And so I am not going to spend my time jabbing about it. I'm going to start bringing in our first of many incredible speakers so that we can get their expert opinions on this issue. And the first person I would like to bring up is Representative Crockett. Representative Crockett is going to talk with us about what happened in Texas. So Jasmine Crockett, hello there. How are you?
I'm well. How about yourself?
I am doing great. It's wonderful to see you, sis.
Yes, good to see you too. It's amazing that we did survive. I don't know if I would have been able to live through those types of results in Texas yesterday. But, you know, I thank God it was in Virginia, and hopefully Virginia will get his life back in order and we can move on. But, you know, a lot of people have been watching Texas. Obviously, we had terrible voter suppression laws that were being pushed that ultimately did pass in the state of Texas. Those laws have not taken effect just yet. They are scheduled to take effect on December 2nd. That's number one. Number two, you know, we're still hoping that the feds get their lives together, you know, or I shouldn't even say the feds. I should say the U.S. Senate, or I should say two specific senators. We're hoping that they get their lives together and get this legislation passed so that we can have pre-clearance. It's absolutely needed in the state of Texas. As it relates to our elections yesterday, we didn't have very much on the ballot. We had constitutional amendments. We had a terrible turnout. I don't really feel as if, you know, anything was too overly cumbersome. Texas already does make it more difficult than all other 50 states to vote in general, but this is one of those low turnout times for us anyway. I want to say they said maybe about 1% of voters voted. I mean, it was something ridiculous. So, you know, we had a few special elections in different places. We lost a House seat that had been held by a Democrat in a special election. We did lose that. It was a razor thin margin. So things aren't looking the best overall, but some of our smaller races, some of our school board races and city council races, we saw a number of progressives that were able to be elected. So I think we had more progressives get elected in the state of Texas than Virginia. So I don't really know what that means.
Not either. That's a very interesting outcome. Now, let me ask you, because as you mentioned, really Texas has been getting a lot of attention around the laws that have been passed, even though they haven't gone into effect yet. But sort of looking ahead, what do you see as the future as these laws do begin to take hold? Do you see them as something that will literally have a huge cooling off effect on the Black voting power and brown voting power in the state of Texas?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was the entire point, right? Because one thing we didn't hear about yesterday, as Republicans took Virginia, as a Republican seat was won in the state house in Texas, was voter fraud. All of a sudden, ain't nobody talking about that, right? Like, our laws are still the same, okay? At least in the state of Texas, and we didn't hear about voter integrity. And we know that Virginia expanded access. They expanded access, and they won. So where's the voter fraud? Why aren't we having these conversations now, right? It's all this dog whistle. They are specifically targeting certain people. We know that they're looking at those that are of a lower socioeconomic situation. We know that they're looking at those that are disabled. We know that they are looking at those that are Black and brown. And I do feel as if it's going to be problematic. Number one, because they increase the penalties for so many things. And it's like, no one knows what's in the law, but ignorance of the law is never an excuse, right? And so they want to make it confusing. They wanted to go through these various iterations so that people are like, I don't even know what the law is, but I'm not going to take a chance on going to jail. Just trying to exercise what supposedly is constitutionally protected, right? And so we know that that's going to happen. We know that they've tried to continually make examples of this is what the face of voter fraud looks like. Seemingly, it's always a Black person, right? Not true, okay? Like, prosecutors have prosecutorial discretion, and they've decided to go after one of our most famous faces is Crystal Mason, a woman that attempted to vote, that did not actually cast a vote. She cast a provisional ballot that was not counted. And somehow she's looking at 5 years in prison. And she's been fighting that ever since it was handed down. And so they want to basically put her in the town square, say, look what happens to y'all when y'all decide that y'all want to participate. Because if Texas goes blue, Republicans have no chance at the White House, period. Like, they're done. They need all of those electoral votes to go their way. And every year we're seeing a tightening. And so the only thing that they could do was play this game and act as if, you know, one of the things that was mentioned earlier was messaging, right? They put out these messages and lies. She said messaging. I'm saying lying. They've been lying and lying and lying. And that's what they're doing. They're lying and they're stoking fears. And we know, you know, when they do an evaluation of where are the college educated folk voting, where are the non-college educated folk vote, they know what they're doing. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And Democrats keep saying, we're going to take the high road. Let me tell you something. We're going to keep getting like whooped. And I don't think that it's the low road to call somebody out. And I think that that's what we've got to do as Democrats. You know, just like I said, they're lying. They are liars. They have been lying. Okay. There was no voter fraud. Yet we had to change all these laws and have all of this legislation that swept through the country. And now Republicans are voting against things such as the Voting Rights Act, something that was reauthorized over and over and over in a bipartisan way. The first time that we got this act was in 1965. But all of a sudden in 2021, it's controversial to allow us to vote, right? Like, it's mind-boggling. And no one is just calling a spade and saying, listen, these people are lying. They are stoking fear. They are upset about how colorful we are getting in this country. We saw that Anglos, for the first time ever, that they decreased as far as population when we looked at the census. And honestly, anyone that knows anything about the census, we know that there's always a significant undercount when it comes to African Americans as well as brown folk. So if they decreased under those circumstances, then goodness, we know that they really, really, really decreased. And so it's just a lot of lies, stoking of fears, lots of white supremacy issues popping off as well. And we've got to start just calling them out on it. And we've got to start fighting. We can't continue to sit on our hands and say, well, we're going to play nice as they're demolishing us.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, and I'm looking at specifically Texas again. Not only did you have these sort of draconian voting suppression laws pushed forward, you had these crazy redistricting measures pushed forward as well, where, as you mentioned, all of the population growth that happened in Texas, according to the last census, happened as a result of people of color. And I'm thinking that all of that is related, right? That's related to what's going on with voting rights, voting suppression laws. That's related to what's going on with redistricting. Could you just sort of break down to us what you see as the impact of the redistricting laws and how that will impact Black voting power in Texas?
Oh, absolutely. So I kept telling people it was a 1-2 punch. They wanted the voter suppression, and they also wanted to gerrymander these lines in such a way that for the next decade, they could dilute the voices of minorities. So as you mentioned, 95% of the growth was due to African Americans, Latinos, and Asian Americans. And guess how many new African American, Asian American, or Latino seats we got when it came to Congress? 0. The state of Texas was able to pick up 2 new congressional seats because of the growth in the state of Texas. So representative government should look like, right, the people that cause the growth, they get representation. Not in the state of Texas. Like, we're terrible at math, obviously. So no, absolutely not. Instead, 2 new Anglo majority seats were created. Now, let me give you numbers. Like, let me break this down. We had approximately 180,000 new Anglos that were added in the last decade in the state of Texas. Total, 180,000. Each congressional seat alone is 766,000. So somehow we got 2 new Anglo majority seats. That makes up about 1.5 million people, yet they only added a total of 180,000 people. Make it make sense, okay? So the only way that you could do that was by cracking and diluting voices. We saw them do it in Tarrant County, which is where the Cowboys play. For those of you not from Texas, they play in Arlington, and they actually cut through Arlington, Grand Prairie. And what they did is they basically cut up African Americans into multiple districts so that now they don't have this voting strength that they should be entitled to. Or the fact that we know that we have so many Latinos in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they didn't get a new Latino majority seat. So that's what Republicans have done with their power. They don't play fair. They lie, they steal, they cheat. And it's not about these culture wars, right? Like, the only way that they can win is if they get other people on board. But typically they are fighting for the top 1%ers or the top 10%ers. That's all they care about. When you look at the Texas House, we have so many people that are linked to the oil industry. We're talking about their pockets, okay? They are protecting their pockets, but you can't win with that type of message, right? Like, you can't win if you're out there saying, hey, we've got to fight for the oil companies. Instead, what they've got to do is figure out something to get other people motivated, people that don't know what they're talking about. So let's talk about critical race theory. It sounds like a bad thing. Let's stoke fear there, right? And it's not about that. They could care less. It's about making sure that they keep their money coming. It's about putting profits over people. That is why we saw in the state of Texas that we lost so many people in the winter storm, and they refused to go in and regulate these oil and gas companies because profits matter more than people.
And so, to really quickly wrap up here, I think about the bravery of you and your colleagues risking arrest, having all those threats being hurled at you when you left Texas to come here and try to talk some sense into the Democrats in the Senate. And here we are months later and still nothing has happened. What do you think we can all do? We can all do in order to inject a sense of urgency around protecting our voting rights at a national level?
I think we're in a terrible situation. I think so many of us have been asleep at the wheel. I feel like we are so reactionary. It's like, oh, wait a minute, something went wrong. But we've got these 2 senators that nobody's been paying attention to, and they've got 6-year terms. They're not up for another 6 years. So we're stuck with these 2 senators. And so what I would encourage any and everyone to do is, number one, I know some of us are just getting into that mode where we're like, hey, we're going to go vote. And that's great, right? Voting is great. And I don't want to discourage that. But it's time to do more. we got to dig in. It's not good enough that you just go vote. You got to go take somebody to vote. You got to make sure that if there's a candidate that you believe in, that you actually go and volunteer for them, that you actually spread their message on social media, that you actually donate to their campaigns. Right now, we're really stuck at an impasse as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I don't really see the change coming that we need out of Sinema and Manchin. I really don't see it happening. It is very sad. And the only thing that we can do is do better next time. But we got to stop falling asleep at the wheel. We only wake up when everything is on fire instead of staying on top of it. Organizations and conversations like this, these y'all have been around, right? Like the reality is that people have to be tapped in all the time and stay on top of it. And every election should be an urgent matter. It should be a sense of urgency that we all feel when it comes down to, let me make sure that I get this person that even when I'm asleep, they're not going to be doing crazy stuff behind my back, but instead they're still going to be looking out for me.
I hear you. Well, we want to thank you so much, Representative Crockett, for joining us today, lending your insights, and we're so proud of you. We're going to all continue the fight. All right, my dear?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Such a powerful conversation. And let me just remind everybody, obviously, this is a nonpartisan discussion here. Voting rights is nonpartisan. Everybody deserves to have the right to vote, and that's what we're talking about fighting for. With that said, we're super excited to bring up next Dr. Elsie Scott, who's going to go over some exit polls for us to tell us exactly what happened last night and why. Okay, Elsie, are you here, my dear? Hello.
Hello. How are you? It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, my dear.
It's so great to see you.
You too.
I'm sorry we are coming together on the day when we have a lot of bad news, but that's life, right?
That's life. We live to fight. We live to continue to fight. So let us know what happened last night in Texas. I'm sorry, not Texas, Virginia and New Jersey. Can you peel back the layers for us with a look at some of those exit polls?
Yeah, we are trying. You know, it's a lot of data still coming in, and New Jersey was sort of off the radar screen for a lot of people, and so it's not as much data out there, and it just shocked a lot of people in terms of what happened in New Jersey. But we have a lot more information on what happened in Virginia on yesterday, because there were some hints that things were happening in Virginia that people had begun to tune into right before the election. But you know, when we talk about polling, and Melanie and I were talking about how we're going to have to start a polling service ourselves, because that way we know that we'll be getting more accurate data. We'll be talking to the right people. So, but the data that we do have looked at some of the issues related to why people voted, who voted, how did this compare to the 2020 election. So in Virginia, that there was a lot of emphasis on Trump, and a lot of people seemed to feel like Trump was going to be the most important factor in this election. But that was not necessarily so when you look at the exit polls. The key issues, according to the exit polls in Virginia, were taxes was number one, the economy, the economy was number one. And then you had education, you had taxes that were also of key interest, but the economy and jobs. But the interesting thing, when you look at if the economy and jobs was the most important issues for people that were going out to vote, then why did so many say the economy is doing very well in Virginia, and then you move to vote for somebody who's going to come in and turn over the apple cart of what you're going for? So that's one of the interesting things that need to be followed up on when you start digging down into the data. But when you looked at why did people vote for Mccullough, And the top reason they supported him, when you look at the top issues, was coronavirus. They thought he would do better with handling the virus, had better solutions for dealing with it. When you looked at who voted for the issues that drove people to his opponent, Youngkin, then you see education became a big issue in the last few days, because Youngkin was able to tie that in both to McCullough's conversation about parents and parents having say-so in the school system. And also he was able to tie it in the last few days into this whole thing of what's being taught in the schools and this whole boogeyman of CRT, critical race theory. I saw an interesting film the other day where they were interviewing a man in Virginia, and he was saying critical race theory was one of the big reasons why he was coming out to vote, because he was opposed to it. And the reporters say, well, what is critical race theory? And he said, I don't really know, but I'm against it. So this is something we have to be concerned about when we have people going to the polls and voting who have not been educated about what the issues are and what the issues mean. Now, in terms of Trump versus Youngkin, that, so many people saw Trump as being the big issue and one of the big problems here, that we see that when we look at the exit polls, that Youngkin did better, much, much better than Trump in Virginia, because if he hadn't, he would not have won. So he had to pull in more voters from various demographics. But since we primarily have a Black audience here, let me just talk about race. That 74% of the people who voted in Virginia, based on the exit polls, were white. And McCullough got 38% of those. Youngkin got 61%. Now, Biden had gotten 45% of the white vote in the 2020 election, and Trump got 53%. So Youngkin did better in terms of pulling white voters than Trump did. 16% of the people who voted, according to the exit polls in Virginia, were Black. And Black men would be interested to know, as well as Black women too, I think, that Black men voted, according to these exit polls, at a slightly higher percentage than Black women. That 87% of the Black men who voted for McCullough, and Black men, according to the exit polls, voted for Youngkin. And so that was a slight difference from what we had before. But Black women, I think it was like 86% voted for McCullough as opposed to Youngkin. So when you look at Latino votes, that McCullough did better with Latino voters than Biden did in the general election. And he did better with, he did better. Of course, he did better than Trump did with the Hispanic voters. So we look at sex. White men made up 36% of the voters. White women made up 38%. Black men 7%. Black women 9%. But when you look at how they voted, again, you have white women voting for the Republican candidate. So 57% of the white women voted for Youngkin, 43% for McCullough. In terms of white men, again, Youngkin drew 66%, which was more than what Trump pulled in the 2020 election. Black women, only 14% voted for Youngkin, 86% voted for McCullough. Black men, 87% voted for McCullough. And when you look at this, compare it to Biden, how Biden did in the 2020, 86% of Black men voted for Biden. So McCullough pulled a few more, a smaller percentage. A slightly larger percentage of Black men than Biden had done. And for Black women, Biden pulled 92% of Black women, and McCullough only pulled 86%. So over half of the white college grads voted for McCullough. So that was sort of expected. So what does all this owe? In terms of Jersey, well, let me just say one more thing about Virginia, about the education. In terms of, there was a question about how much say should parents have in what their children's schools teaches. And the people who voted for Youngkin, 76% felt like parents should have a whole lot of say into what their children's schools are teaching. Because what Youngkin was able to capture on was he saw all of these school board meetings being taken over by parents who were mad about schools being closed, who were mad about masks, etc. And so he was able to play to that and get those people who were already fired up about an issue. Then he was able to get them fired up enough to come out to vote. There was not as much passion on the Democratic side in Virginia as there was on the Republican side. I don't know how much more time I have, Avis. Okay, should I keep going? Okay,
well, if you can just wrap up in just a couple of minutes, that would be great.
Okay.
As soon as you can, if you could wrap up in like about a minute or two, that'd be great.
Okay. So one thing, it seems that for New Jersey, from the little polling information I've been able to find, is that New Jerseyans were more focused on New Jersey issues rather than national issues. And it may be because in Virginia, McCullough brought in everybody from the president and the vice president to the former president. And so some people felt like he was nationalizing the local election. Whereas they say in New Jersey, people were more focused on New Jersey-centric issues and referendums. In New Jersey, taxes was the top issue that supposedly drew people to the polls. 51% cited taxes as major issue. And then the rest of the issues are all over the place. 16% jobs, 13% healthcare, 6% New Jersey transit, 4% crime, 9% others. And it's interesting with the Virginia election that crime was not an issue, even though if you looked at the commercials in Virginia, you saw a lot about crime, especially in the attorney general's race and in the lieutenant governor's race and the governor's race. But it wasn't in the polling. And I don't know whether it was the way the questions were drafted, or what was the reason why it was not as much of an issue. So just sort of to wrap this up, I need to mention, since this is the Black Women's Roundtable, that there was a Black woman who won the lieutenant governor's race in Virginia on yesterday. But, it was interesting that I think the day before the election or the day of the election, that she was on national TV saying that the Democratic Party manipulates Black voters. And so it's interesting that if you think that the Black voters are being manipulated in terms of who to vote for and how to vote, then what was her recommendation as to how you could stop manipulating Black voters? But to me, it was playing on the intelligence of Black people. If Black people are manipulated in terms of voting, you are suggesting that Black people don't have a mind of their own, and that they are not voting in their interests. And so, to me, that was somewhat of an insult to me as a Black woman. So
Absolutely
I'll just close on that.
Suppose that's the price you had to pay to get on the ticket, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, Dr. Scott.
Okay, thank you, and good luck on the rest of the program.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So next, we're going to go for a little bit of an in-depth look at what happened in Virginia. This is kind of like what all the buzz pretty much is about today. So in order to provide us with that perspective, we're going to bring up Crystal Jones to give us a sense of, hey, what happened? All righty. Hey there, Crystal.
Hello, Liz. How are you?
I am doing great. Wonderful to see you.
You too.
Okay. Can you give us some behind the scenes perspective on what led up to what we all saw happen yesterday?
Absolutely. I think Dr. Scott really actually did an excellent job of giving some of those messages. I think a lot of us kind of knew starting back in the primary. I think that there were a lot of people, and that actually played out yesterday. There were some concerns just about what happened. I mean, as most people probably know, there are actually 3 African-American candidates who were in the primary, 2 who were Black women. Some people just weren't too excited about how it ended up. So I think we knew there was going to be somewhat of an enthusiasm gap starting from then. But a lot of people did move forward. But I think throughout the election cycle, while voter turnout did increase for didn't do too badly, I should say, for African Americans, and Dr. Scott definitely gave that summary. There was a concern. I mean, I think just people felt the concern. And so in addition to some of the national concerns about Black turnout and that people were saying might happen in Virginia, I think the primary definitely played a part. I will reiterate, obviously we did have the first woman and the first woman of color, a Black woman, elected to lieutenant governor. And so as you all were saying, that's a whole nother conversation, but that is a fact. I think it's also important to recognize that with Virginia, because of the delays we're having in redistricting, we will be having elections for the House of Delegates next year. So there actually was a flip. It went from Democrat to Republican. So there will be another election in terms of House of Delegates next year. In terms of how Black candidates fared, in addition to the lieutenant governor candidate, there was a net loss of 2 seats for Black women in the General Assembly. And then also, but there were some success stories at local races across the state. For example, Narendra Pleas in Suffolk City in the Tidewater, Newport News, Virginia Beach area. She will be the first Black and the first female Commonwealth attorney in Suffolk City. So while there were, as a lot of people may be disappointed today, there's a little bit of glimmer of hope and increase in voter turnout and some successes in terms of Black candidates.
Right. That is good to know. That is good to know that at least there are some things that we can be happy about. But generally speaking, I heard you say that we didn't have too much of did I hear you say that there wasn't too much of a Black voter turnout fall off for this particular?
We were almost proportional. So like Dr. Scott said, it was about 16% turnout. We're 20% of the population. Not horrible. But I think it was obvious the enthusiasm simply wasn't there. I will say, and I believe, I'm not sure if the representative said this as well. One thing I think should be a reminder to us is that this is a 365-day-a-year program. It cannot just be election season. And we demand that of our candidates, but we have to also remember as advocates the same thing. So we have to pressure them to 365 days a year. I also want us to continue to think long term. While we may be upset with the results today, think about the successes, just like the representative mentioned in terms of the voting rights expansions in Virginia. That's huge. Let's continue to think down the road about what we need to achieve and just look at this as one step along the journey.
Absolutely. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Krista.
Thank you.
Wonderful having you. So now we have some other voices from various different states to give us some perspective on what happened there. So joining us from Alabama is Commissioner Sheila Tyson, who's also convener of Alabama's Black Women's Roundtable. Letitia Daniels Jackson, the convener of the Southern Alabama's Black Women's Roundtable. From Georgia, we have Helen Butler and Ariel Singleton, and we'll have others on as we go through. So, hello there! Oh my goodness, the hair girl! Yes! Oh my goodness, I love it. We have to give a little minute for hair adoration. Okay. You look amazing. Great to see you, Commissioner.
So do you.
So what in the world is going on in Alabama? Let us know. Get us up to speed.
What's not going on in Alabama? We have just passed HB 314, which is, it doesn't take effect until February 2025. But in order for that to happen, what they're doing is, in order to check and make sure that you stay in a location that you are registered in, they are going into your personal post office to check your address, to make sure that you are registered in the location that you are putting on your registration form. And if you're not, they will purge you off the list. They are also checking Facebook. If you are ordering material from Facebook, they will go to Facebook, check that mailing address where you're mailing your items from, and they will purge you off the list. They give you 90 days. Once they send you a card, the card that they send you, you would just look at it and think that it's junk mail. You really wouldn't, unless you just sit and read it. The writing is small. So do we have a fair opportunity to really make the corrections that they claim that we don't stay in this residence? Because I order stuff and I send it to my sister's house, because I can't mail stuff to my house if I'm not at home. I need someone at home, and she's at home, so I mail it to my sister's house. So that don't mean that if I use another address, that don't mean that I don't stay there. That means I use another address. So you can't go by that. You should be going by what's on my ID and what bills that I have, utility bills and all of that that comes to my house. So why do this state have to do that? Because we have complained about over the 400,000 people that they have purged from the list. So what they're doing, they're going through the back door in order to purge us off the list. So of course, Alabama is the only state that will create a bill number HB 285, which is not, it doesn't even exist. This bill that they are doing doesn't exist. It's curbside voting. We do not have curbside voting. So how can you stop curbside voting in Alabama? And it don't exist. So that means if you're disabled, handicapped, and you don't have the ability to get to your polling spot or get to the county courthouse, that means that you will not get an opportunity to vote, because the way that they got absentee voting right now, it's just impossible for you to vote, because you have to have a ID that they require. They require a state ID with the state seal on it in order to verify that you are that person. You can't have your work ID. You can't have your Medicaid card, your utilities. Right now, IDs are very expensive. So what if you can't afford to purchase one? I know plenty of people who don't have a state ID. So they are at it again. They're doing what they do. They are at their best at what they do, and that's purging the voters from the voting roster.
My goodness. Wow. I'm telling you that they are busy, aren't they?
They are busy, but the citizens have to stay, they got to stay woke. They got to be prepared for this. Every day is voting day. Everything that you do consists on who you put in office. They go from the local elections all the way up to the state, all the way up to the federal. These people are making decisions on your life. And I think that we need to really, really realize that how important our vote is. Black people, we are moving people in these positions. We are putting them over our tax dollars. I shouldn't have to beg you every time we need a bill paid, we need something that's for Black and brown people. I shouldn't have to beg you for my tax dollars. I think that is so unfair. We need to understand that we carry the power in our hands, especially here in the state of Alabama. We have so many hidden votes that people do not have access to the polls. They are being purged off the voters roster. They are being moved from one box to another. They go to 5 boxes. They don't have transportation. The public transportation here is awful. You have a lot of rural areas. We have hundreds and thousands of hidden votes that's sitting in the block that we can't get to because we do not have the infrastructure or the funding to move these people from their home to the voting box. So that's why it's so important that you pay attention to the South. The South is making all of these rules. We are the reason that it's a John Lewis voting bill on the books now that we're fighting for out of Shelby County.
Yes.
So it's some things that we can do in the state of Alabama, and we are working hard on it, Dr. Avis. And I feel like it's a lot of things that we are going to shock everybody with next year.
I hear you. Well, thank you so much for being in that fight, Commissioner Tyson. You are always in the battle. I want to thank you for your hard work because we need you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. So I'm excited now to bring up representatives from both Georgia and Michigan to tell us what's going on in those various states. So please welcome, as we bring up on the screen, Helen Butler, who is the convener of Georgia's Black Women's Roundtable, as well as Ariel Singleton. And by the way, Helen is Miss Cover Girl. Congratulations. And from Michigan, Stephanie Moore, as well as Tamika Ramsey. Hello, 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 everyone.
Hi there.
Hello. Well, I want to start off with Helen and Ariel. If you can give us a sense of what in the world is going on in Georgia. Okay. Hey there, Tamika.
All right. Well, let's say Georgia just finished our municipal elections yesterday. We had some 300 plus cities out of the 536 cities in Georgia that had local elections. Some were elections of mayors and city councils and school boards, but some were just referendums on taxes, special taxes. We had a special House district race, House District 165 in Savannah, replacing a representative, Mickey Stevens, who passed. And that was won by a Black woman, I must say. The former mayor of Savannah, Edna Jackson, became our representative for the House District 165. Turnout, we don't have the actual breakdown in terms of ethnic demographics or racial demographics, but we did have turnout between 10% and 21%, depending on the city and what issue was on the ballot. What we had were a lot of Black females that were elected. We had a mayor of Clarkston. We had a mayor in Stone Mountain. And of course, we have the big runoff in the city of Atlanta with Felicia Moore being the top vote-getting candidate there for the city of Atlanta mayor. We have two women, Black female city council districts, Joyce Shepard and Cleta Winslow, that will be surprisingly in a runoff. And there are other areas like that we will have runoffs beginning November the 30th. Unfortunately, it's just 4 weeks away. That's going to create problems for us. We won't have a Saturday voting that we normally will have. And of course, we saw some of the problems yesterday with the voting part was people in Henry County, where the polling locations were open till 11:30 p.m. last night because of poor functioning machines, non-functioning machines, as well as a newly elected official who really didn't know how to run elections. Having people vote at 2 polling locations in the same county. One county election, you had to vote at one location, and for the city election, you had to vote at another location. We saw absentee balloting drop off because of SB 202. Drop boxes were not available on election day. So people had to really go inside in spite of the pandemic still being there to really cast their vote. So those were some of the kinds of things that we had. Also, if you were out of your precinct and you got there before 5 p.m., you were not allowed to cast your ballot, a provisional ballot, as you normally would have been. You'd have to go to another location. So these were some of the kinds of barriers that people face, but at least they showed up. We are hoping that people will continue to show up. And we had our election protection teams across the state monitoring and assisting voters. And of course, we'll be doing the same thing in the runoff. So we don't want people to get discouraged. Ariel will talk about the young people, I guess, in terms of how they turned out. And of course, Black women always lead in terms of demographics for turnout.
Yes. So just like Ms. Helen was saying, you know, one thing I do want to point out is that we have to recognize that this year or this election was the first time that Georgia voters were having, or the first time since Senate Bill 202 was passed, that we had to vote under those ramifications. And so with that being passed, there was a lot of changes that happened. So one thing we noticed, like, we don't have the numbers, we don't have the exact demographics as of yet, but we did visibly notice that there was a lower turnout rate. There was maybe some voter fatigue going on, people having to get back to the polls and knowing that Senate Bill 202 was kind of in the air or a cloud over their voting for whatever reason, may not have showed up. But through that, individuals persevered. They still got out and vote. Individuals were voting. There was shorter lines than usual. We had some minor setbacks last night with machines and knowing what was going on. Other than that, though, people showed up and they showed out. So I was really proud. Unfortunately, like I said, we don't have the direct numbers. But when it comes to Black youth, we are really trying to stay on them and trying to get them more civically engaged. So we saw where in the general election of last year that they showed up and they had record numbers. This year, we were hoping for a little bit more engagement. However, we're keeping them on. So we have a runoff, like as mentioned, that's happening November 30th. So trying to get them back out there and knowing the importance. And thank God that it is a Black woman that's in that race and you have a Black male that's in that race. So hopefully that gives somebody some hope for knowing what's going on and what they can see. We've had over 15, I think it was around 1,500 municipal elections in the state of Georgia. So there's things like this going on in other cities and counties in Georgia. So we're very hopeful of young engagement and youth engagement.
That sounds really great. Let me ask you one question, if you can just answer really quickly, because I'm curious, given that this is the first election that you have experienced in Georgia since you have had this new, what I would call, voter suppression law go into effect there. You know, what do you think is the impact there? I heard Helen talk about some of the challenges that people were facing. Do you think that will have, as we move forward, a suppressive effect in future elections?
I do. I believe that it is what it is. It's a voter suppression bill, as you said, or a voter suppression law that is in place. And unfortunately, when it not only suppresses individuals from what they can do, having those issues and those challenges that Ms. Helen did mention, they also get their emotions get suppressed, their ideas get suppressed, their general how they think about voting is suppressed. So it discourages people from doing so. So whether or not somebody may feel discouraged mentally because they know that, hey, I need this certain license, or I can't wait in a long line, or this election is going to be taken over by the state. They still have this mental idea that voting just doesn't work because they noticed that they did it. But then there's a voter suppression law that's in place that's keeping them or trying to keep them from voting. So unfortunately, they succumb to those ideas of what is in place. So suppression, it's crazy that we're having to deal with that. But one thing I know, especially with Miss Helen and some of the other partners that we work with, that we're organizers on the ground and we're ready to help individuals combat that feeling and to also give them some voter pride.
I love it. I love it. So now to find out what happened in Michigan, we have with us Tamika Ramsey and Stephanie Williams. Tamika, would you get us kicked off, girl?
Yes, I will. And thank you. And it's nice seeing you, all of you, even if it's virtually. So in Michigan, we had a lot of municipal races across the state. In 2018, we passed Prop 3, which helped us with our voting, which made it more secure. It was a referendum, so it was a ballot initiative that people voted on, and it was overwhelmingly passed. And so our elections, then when COVID happened, we had no reason absentee already in place, right? So we had some of these things already going for us. And then after the 2020 election, Michigan was one of those states where they had a failed insurrection here as well, have put threats on our governor's life, and are now trying to pass another ballot initiative to go around the governor and go around people by saying we need to make the vote more secure. It is a lot of people here who feel like Donald Trump is still president. And so we are dealing with that. And in the city of Detroit, they tried to stop the recount. They tried to stop the counting of ballots because they did not want the outcome. And so we know that in areas, in cities where there is a very large Black population, they are trying to attack them. So some of the things that they're trying to change, and they keep getting vetoed by the governor, thus they're trying to have this ballot initiative to go around the governor, is you have to put identifying information on the envelope of your ballot, like your social security number, the last 4 digits. Now we know that identity theft is very heavy in this digital world now. And so why would we give more information to people use to hurt us? Another thing is signatures matching. They want to make sure that your signature matches from when you did your application to that day. We know that that really does hurt our elderly and our disabled who might not write the same, right? So they are doing these things to secure the vote because they did not like the results of the 2020 election. The Republican Party did a study on the election and found that there was no fraud. So why are you now trying to change laws to stop Black and brown people, elderly people, and disabled people from voting, right? This has a lot to do with the color of our skin and the values that we lead with, and not if the elections in Michigan are safe. They are safe. They are secure. Both parties have said so, and we want to continue to keep that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamika. Wow. They're busy. They continue to be busy in every state, right? Stephanie,
Hi, Dr. Avis. So yes, I am touching bases with you from the west side of the state in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and we have the honor to really compliment and support the work of our sisters over on the east side of the state in Detroit. So everything that she said about the policy, the work that we're doing it in lock and step. I wanted to give you a little bit of idea of what we're doing, since all of us have been pretty much surviving to be able to thrive from COVID-19. We've been really taking care of all of our people that are boots on the ground, especially our sisters, those that are maternal or not, to be able to be advocates about the policies impacting our bodies, being able to stand up and say, no, we're going to protect ourselves and our children. We have the right to breathe, the right to reproductive justice. We did a lot to get ready for Get Out the Vote efforts. You know, we are nonpartisan. And in that preparation, Avis, we did a lot of healing work. We brought together all of our folks on the ground to do work with practitioners that can help us learn how to just process and heal so that we can be active like we were yesterday on the ground. Yesterday, we did parties at the polls. We inspired people to come on out, eat, drink, turn up with us, but go in that poll and vote. And then we were there to make sure we protected their right to vote. We had lawyers on site if anybody had any issues. We eliminated barriers. We're taking people to the polls all day on yesterday. Dr. Avis, we was even driving them to the little things where you can put it in the little drop box, basically. Even if it was around the corner, we didn't care. We provided food for everybody. And we talked to our voters. Why did you get out to vote? Did you have any barriers? What are the issues that you're more concerned about? What are you thinking about going into next year? And then we're also really developing our leaders to be in position, regardless if they want to run for office, if they want to serve on boards, committees, advisory boards, so that we can have strong voices, Black women leaders in the room where policy is being discussed, budgets are being dispersed, and absolutely when lines are being drawn, and when we need to make sure that our voting right is protected. So we're doing this work on the ground level. We're also doing it on the policy level, making sure our faces and our voices are heard in our state capitol in Lansing. And most importantly, we're educating. Yes, COVID-19 is real. Get vaccinated and now get your booster. Yes, policies that are impacting us, especially our right to vote, we got to be there and we're going to push back. Matter of fact, we're knocking them down. We're not standing for it. And then we also are making sure that everything that's coming through, that we're having these kitchen table conversations, Black women power brunches, that we're talking about strategy, how to build power, where in these spaces we need to have whole healthy spaces for individuals. But most importantly, be ready, because the work continues and we're ready for it.
Oh my goodness. I love it. You have been working, girl. I'm loving it. And I'm thinking about all that you're making it fun, you're making it substantive, and you are really making it as easy as possible for people to be able to exercise their right to vote. Just really quickly, when I voted yesterday in Virginia, it was a rainy, kind of cool, dreary day here. And I felt so bad because there's one little sister out there trying to hand out ballots, getting rained on under a tarp. I felt so bad for her. I offered to go get her some coffee. But I'm thinking about, you made it a party, right? And I think all of those things are important in order to maximize voter turnout. So thank you.
One last thing, Dr. Avis, is that we know that people are voting via absentee ballot at a high record number. So we were there to help, to assist, to support, encourage people in Michigan to vote early, either be an absentee, go to your local city clerk's office. We were there when they were open on the weekend, on Saturday and Sunday, and where people had questions, we were helping them and encouraging them to use that opportunity to make sure that you exercise your right to vote. And we also made sure we hit our brothers and sisters that were incarcerated in jail, that had not been convicted, that had the right to vote. They had access to their ballots, as well as education on how to vote. So it's a well-rounded, we can only do this under the leadership of Melanie Campbell, our support with the Black Women's Roundtable and NCBCP, and all our sisters in these states around this country. We are here. We are fearless, unbought and unbossed, and not going anywhere.
And you're fierce. So thank you. You all left no stone unturned. So congratulations, each and every one of you, for all of your hard work. I have no sort of hesitation or no doubt that you're going to continue to fight. So thank you so much for all of your great work, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So next, we are going to hear from BWR members from Mississippi, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, who will share with us all of the different perspectives from their respective states around addressing the vote. Okay, what happened? All right, so from Mississippi, we have Cassandra Welchland. From Ohio, we have Periette Talley. And from Pennsylvania, Dr. Judith Moore. Hello, everyone. How are you?
Hey, everybody.
Great to see you all. So I'm going to start with Cassandra, to the right of me in the Brady Bunch boxes. What's going on in Mississippi, my girl?
Good to see y'all. It's really good to be in y'all's presence. So Mississippi did have several elections across the state yesterday, several special elections. Just a little bit of background. Mississippi, has some of the most restrictive voting laws in the country. We have no early voting, so I get jealous every time I hear y'all talk about a mailbox drop or you can have this many days. We ain't got that. We have absentee voting. That is our early voting.
Wow.
We also have to show, of course, our ID when we go to the polls. And there's a lot of voter roll discrepancies where voters are being removed. Voters who are eligible are being removed, from the rolls. And also, we have these disenfranchisement crimes, right? With 23 disenfranchisement crimes where folks can't vote because of these crimes. And then some of the other issues we experienced and really saw, yesterday, changes in polling locations with limited awareness or no awareness at all. We experienced that. So particularly on yesterday, we had 4 special elections across the state. It's too early to really know what the data is around Black women turnout, but we usually, like as Ms. Helen said, turnout regardless. So we'll know that in about a couple of weeks. There were 2 Black women candidates the races that we had yesterday, there was 2 Senate races, there was 1 House race, and then in one county, which I am in, which is Hinds County, we actually had 3 races, a sheriff race, a constable race, and county court judge race. And what I would say is that we're having a lot of Black women getting elected into judgeships, which is pretty amazing and incredible. And we've been on that trend. But yesterday, there were 2 Black women candidates that did very well in the county court judge, subdistrict 1, and they will be the judges for, and this is the judgeship for youth court. And so one of those women won that yesterday, Judge Carlin Hicks. Both of them are amazing women. And then for the first time, we had a candidate running in a very crowded field of 10 men for county constable seat. And that was very interesting. She emerged leading with 30% of the vote, and she is headed to the runoff on the 23rd. So people didn't see her coming, but she came. And she got 30% of the vote. So we're seeing in the sheriff race, we had, I believe, 3 women in the sheriff race yesterday. There was a crowded field, I think of about 13. We had 3 Black women that were running, or 2 Black women that were running in that election. And one of them got 30% of the vote.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was pretty incredible. And just what we are seeing as a real issue is precincts are not properly staffed due to a lack of election staff. Precincts not opening on time, workers not showing up, and again, as I said before, temporary precincts or precincts are being changed without awareness. But we are seeing across the state that we have a lack of election staff, and so we'll be working to do that. Turnout was very low. Yesterday we had about a little over 32,000 that turned out of 166,000. That was just in Hinds County. So we're waiting for the other counties, but we know that it was low, and we're going to continue to, push for, voting laws, get people more access to the polls. And because we understand that, policy tables should reflect the people's kitchen tables, where we got to have leaders and people having access to the polls in order to get the right leaders there.
Indeed.
And I'll just say one thing. We will be in the news, and we have been. December 1, SCOTUS is hearing the case on the major abortion case before the Supreme Court. Is happening on December 1, and the court is going to weigh in on Mississippi abortion ban, which is intended to challenge Roe versus Wade.
All right. Well, thank you for letting us know what's going on in Mississippi and getting us up to speed, Cassandra. Now we're going to go over to Petey Tally. Petey, what's happening in Ohio?
Hey, Dr. Avis, so good to see you. So good to also see my sister from Mississippi and Pennsylvania and the other speakers. First of all, I want to congratulate the people of the 11th Congressional District for going to the polls and voting in the special election to fill the vacancy that was left when Marcia Fudge became the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Think about it. Clevelanders have been without representation in Congress since February. That's a little over 7 months of not having a voice in the crucial issues that are being debated by this Congress. But now the people of Cleveland will have a representative who will make sure that their issues have priority in Congress. So I want to congratulate Congresswoman-elect Shontel Brown on winning that election. I'm also really excited for a particular race where Black voters elected for the first time in the history of Lima, Ohio, a Black woman as their mayor. Sharita Smith was elected to lead the state's 6th largest Black populated city, so we congratulate her. There were 2 Black women who were appointed to Toledo City Council following 4 members of City Council who accepted suspension when they were federally indicted last year. These 2 Black women were elected along with others to 4-year terms. Sir Sandra McPherson, who's a member of our coalition partner, the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, and Tiffany Preston Whitman, who's a member of the Toledo Black Women's Roundtable, will be carrying forth issues to work with our youth and improve neighborhoods, as well as working to decrease gun violence. These Black women were among a number of other Black women across the state who were on ballots running and winning in city council, school board races all across the state. Another bright spot where Black women made magic happen was in Cleveland again. Black candidate Justin Bibbs was successful in running a strong grassroots campaign, becoming the first a young mayor to lead the city of Cleveland, the first time a new mayor was elected since 2006. But mostly I'm excited for a citizens initiative, Citizens for a Safer Cleveland Issue 24, which was led by Black women, including the mother of Tamir Rice. They prevailed along with other mothers and loved ones who lost loved ones to police killings. So Issue 24 is going to create a commission to oversee police conduct, investigations, and discipline, report and advise about police community relations, and oversee police trainings. It was a huge win for the citizens of Cleveland to be able to have a voice around these police killings that will give more equity. Now, all of the winning that we did across Ohio does not necessarily mean that there was a great job done of mobilizing voters. Voter turnout in Ohio was up slightly over 2019 when it came to voters casting absentee ballots. But in cities that had key races like in Cleveland, like Columbus, Cincinnati, Toledo, voter turnout never reached higher than 25%. What that means, Dr. Avis, is that 75% of registered voters did not feel motivated enough to go and get involved in the process. So we still have a lot of work to do. And while we are not aware of a lot of issues that happened yesterday at the polls, we know that low voter turnout is the result of systemic voter suppression, confusing election administration rules, gerrymandering, massive voter purges, misinformation, racist voting laws. That is the problem, not necessarily the people not going to vote. But we're going to journey on in Ohio. We're going to continue to get ready for the very important 2022 midterm elections, where the Ohio executive branch offices will be on the ballot along with a United States Senate race for 2022. So we're going to continue to prepare between now and then to make sure we do have better and greater turnout and that the votes of Ohioans are protected in these elections.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Petey, for all of your hard work. We all feel better because you're on the job. Next, Dr. Moore, what's happening in Pennsylvania, my dear?
Hello, how are you? And to all of my sisters. Well, the good news is Pittsburgh has elected their first Black mayor. He received 71% of the vote. That means white, Black, men and women of color, young and seniors voted for him. So we're excited about that accomplishment. Also, we are excited in terms of the judicial election results. In 5 Black women being elected, 1 judge of the Superior Court, and 4 judge of the Court of Common Pleas. The bad news, which I'm finding out is not as bad as I thought, but the bad news is less than 23% turnout. An example of that, what we saw throughout the whole day, is that one particular area has a total of 600 votes possible. Only 18 people came out to vote. So we're concerned about what's going on there. Also, we had provided committee chair training, which was made available, but it still needs to be re-examined. In terms of voter suppression, there were none on the election day in terms of exercising, our rights and commitment to vote. But there is a push, though, to suppress past suppression laws. And also we have several lawsuits stemming back from the last presidential election. But we are not discouraged by it all. We're just going to really, like all the other sisters are doing, pushing our way forward. We're looking now at starting a Black youth vote. We figure we can start early, starting in the high schools, and begin to explain to them the importance and what's involved in civic engagement activities. That if we can get them to be engaged in that we can begin to create a whole new generation of those who are committed to the democratic process. Thank you.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Moore, and each and every one of you for all of the hard work that you're doing in Mississippi, in Ohio, and in Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us today.
Okay.
Well, we have a super quick break coming up. Next, it's just 2 minutes. So if you need to make a run to grab some water or something, do it, and then come right back right after this break. See you soon. Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Black Women's Roundtable Power Table Talk. You know, many of you on this stream have probably heard of the Build Back Better Act, right? But you probably are asking yourself, what exactly is that, and how does that impact the lives of Black women? So to answer those questions, we have an incredible panel for you today as we round out this program. Please welcome Carol Joyner, the director of the Labor Project for Working Family and Family Values at Work. Hi there, Carol. Hey there, April Barrett, president of SEIU Local 2015. Hey there, April.
Hey.
Hey, and also Joycelyn Tate, senior policy advisor for the Black Women's Roundtable. Hey there, I'm sure she's coming in just a second. You guys are going to tell us a little bit about how this act impacts Black women from various different aspects. Okay, with that said, we're going to go ahead and get started with you, Carol. Can you tell us a little bit about what Black women and families can expect with regards to this initiative as it relates to the care economy and paid leave?
Thanks a lot, Avis. Good to see all of y'all. Good to be here with you, April. There is a lot. I would say that the framework that the president released about a week ago had a tremendous number of policies in it, and many argue that they are probably the most monumental policies to impact the lives positively of working people ever. Bigger by proportion than the New Deal. They go to the heart of women, families, kids, community. It's a real sort of statement about where this administration puts its, heart with regard to, workers and their families. And so, say that, one of the main what they sought to do was to address the items that were left out of the infrastructure package. So we know that an infrastructure package passed the Senate some time ago, and that package was mainly focused on, our hard infrastructure, bridges, tunnel, that sort of thing. They pulled everything out of it that was critical to our families and our climate and our earth. So they pulled out a lot of all the climate change. They pulled out all of the care economy issues. So it's designed, the Build Back Better package, to address those social and environmental issues. And so what's in it? I'm going to go through very briefly. I'm sure April and Joycelyn will delve a little bit more deeply, but we know that there is so what was requested was to make permanent the child tax credits, which we know, are becoming a policy that can reduce poverty amongst children, cut that in half. We know that there was a significant housing funding in it for all families across the United States. We knew there was a significant climate policy in it that had a big focus on clean energy. We also have child care services as well, both the hardscape, meaning the buildings and the structures, but as well as the services, which would have meant an increase in wages for child care workers. I'm sure that April will go into the supports for home care and community services that was also included. We fought really hard for paid family and medical leave as to be included as well. And the House Ways and Means Committee more than 3 months ago created a framework for what that paid leave would look like. 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave for every family. That it would have a progressive wage replacement, so you would get 85% of your wages reimbursed. It would include a broad definition of family so that we don't leave out anyone based upon who they're married to or living with. And it would also create a legacy state situation where the 10 states, including DC, that already have paid family and medical leave could actually run the federal and their state program. That means that in those states, at least, there would be the federal baseline program of 12 weeks, which I just described, and then whatever they have on top of that. And some states have as many as 16 or more weeks. And so we were elated with that proposal until the two senators got involved in the negotiations and said that well, we don't want, well, it was back and forth about whether they wanted paid leave, whether they liked paid leave. As it turns out, there's some blame to be taken by the White House and Manchin and other folks about whether paid leave should be part of this package. We were also all stymied by the fact that Manchin got involved, and so did Sinema from Arizona, and said we want to shrink this $3.5 trillion package down to maybe 1.75 or 1.5. But there's been lots of negotiations, and I'm sure you all have followed most of that on the news. Where we are today, after weeks and weeks of organizing, crazy amount of time on social media, some demonstrations, some arrests, I mean, just lots of activism around paid leave. We learned today that from Speaker Pelosi, the paid leave will be put back into the framework. It was taken out last week upon introduction. So it could be put back into the framework. We believe that the House is prepared today to take the entire Build Back Better into the Rules Committee, including paid leave. Once the Rules Committee votes on it, it means that they will have a CBO, know how to cost it out, and then it can go to the floor and then to the Senate. I cannot tell you what will happen in the Senate with any of this because we have no idea from day to day where Manchin lives on these issues. I'll leave it there.
So isn't that interesting? One man could be standing in between millions of women having paid leave after they have a child. Interesting.
After they have a child or to survive through the pandemic, because we know that many people got sick, spread the virus, were unable to recover. Many died because they lacked paid leave. And let me just thank everybody on this call for all the work that you've been doing. Joycelyn for managing all of the, the civil disobedience and all the actions that we've taken around paid leave and voting rights. For everybody on this call who came to town last week to lift up their voices about Build Back Better and all these other economic issues. Thank you.
All righty, got you. So I am understanding, should we have a couple of special guests here? Let's really quickly, I want to at least, I know that they are short on time, but I know April's been waiting. So I would love for April to tell us a little bit about what's going on with healthcare. And then we have some special guests that we'll be bringing in just a few minutes.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Avis. And thank you to Melanie Campbell and everyone at the Black Women's Roundtable. It's really a pleasure to be with you all. Carol did an amazing job giving an overview of what's included in Build Back Better. There's just two other pieces that I want to double click on, if I may. Obviously, the first is home care. And the investment in home and community-based services that was included in the president's framework that was announced last week. We have been fighting for decades to make sure that the work that is primarily done by women of color in this country to take care of our seniors, to take care of people with disabilities, the programs that are state-based but funded through Medicaid, that allow for people to live in their homes with dignity when they would otherwise need to choose to spend down all of their little assets, right, and go into nursing homes because they just can't live independently without some help. And let us be clear, this is work that Black women have always done in this country, that we were left out of the New Deal simply because white Southerners did not want to give Black women their just due. And so we were left out of the New Deal. We were left out of the National Labor Relations Act. But now we are starting to gain traction to make what was once the work that enslaved women did, that Black domestic workers did all over this country. We are going to make these good, family-sustaining union jobs that will be the cornerstone of a new middle class led by women of color. And so the investment of $150 billion is the largest investment in these programs and in this workforce that this country has seen in 40 years. And as I said to a reporter last week, I can be tremendously excited about the investments in home and community-based services and childcare and other things, and I can be royally pissed off that paid leave was left out. And so we're super excited about home care. The only thing in either Build Back Better or the physical infrastructure that is targeting Black women and the work that Black women do. Really, really exciting. I also want to lift up the immigration provisions. The president earmarked $100 billion for immigration. We don't yet have a lot of details about what that means, but I think we kind of lose track of us in the immigration conversation because it's so focused around our Latinx sisters and brothers for really good reason. Where I live in Los Angeles, a third of the Black population in the county of Los Angeles was not born in the US. And so let us not forget that we are there, right? And that they are working out the details around how Build Back Better will help immigrant families with benefits and allow them some sanctuary to continue to be in this country.
I'm so glad. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you raised that last point, because oftentimes when we hear about immigration, we rarely look at it through a Black lens. So it's very important that you lift up the fact that we are diverse and we are not all born here. Many of us came here through that particular mechanism. So thanks for raising that up. Next, I would love to hear from Joycelyn. Can you share with us a little bit about issues around jobs, around housing, around education, the environment, things like that? How are those issues addressed through Build Back Better? Uh-oh, you are muted, dear.
Hi. There are right now there's a $4 billion that's allocated towards education. And what it's allocated for is childcare and preschool programs funded for the next 6 years. Now, it expands access to preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds. And for some families, they will pay no more than 7% of their income. It also there are also provisions to increase the Pell Grant that people use to go to undergraduate school, the federal monies that people use to go to college. But it's only increasing it up for about maybe $550, which we really know with the cost of education, that's not a lot. It's helpful, but it's not a lot. We would like to see it raised more. There's also money being targeted to schools and for infrastructure development in public schools, and it's being targeted to schools that need it the most, which we know a lot of times are the schools that are in the Black and brown communities. So we really want to see that money ramped up and into those schools. Now, what's been left on the cutting room floor as far as education is concerned, the 2-year free community college program for all students has been put on the cutting room floor. Now, there are about maybe 20 states that have their own free community college programs, but we really would like to see it on the federal level so that, Black women, a lot of Black women are trying to go to school and work, and some of them are heads of households. So to be able to have that 2 years of free community college before they move on to an undergrad, a bachelor's degree would be very helpful. Also, when we look at the housing provisions in the bill, there's $150 million to build or improve more than 1 million new affordable housing units. And there's also assistance to help with rental and down payment assistance and monies to maintain public housing. Now, while this is great, building 1 million houses helps, but it still falls short of the over 3 billion houses, new homes that are really needed to address the current housing needs in this country. Now, when we look at some of the environmental provisions in the bill, there are tax credits for families, tax credits of up to $12,500 for families who will buy an electric car. So that's something that would help with the environment. Also, there's tax incentives to instill solar panels on your homes. Now, there was an objection by the senator that we've all been talking about to a clean electricity performance program that was in the original bill, which would pay utility companies and that decide to provide renewable energy supplies up to 4% per year and charge companies that did not a fine. Now, why is this important in the Black community? in a lot of our Black communities, we have a lot of our environmental issues are compounded. Sometimes there are toxic waste dumps in our communities. Sometimes, a lot of times, we live in urban communities where there's a high level of pollution in general, just from cars. We live in communities, sometimes in housing with lead pipes. So all of these things are compounded. So being able to have that provide electric companies with that incentive to help clean the environment and clean our air will be one less thing that's heaped upon us as far as environmental, when it comes to environmental justice. So now when you look at the jobs, when we look at the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, it's focused on upgrading the country's physical infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, lead water pipes in our communities, replacing those, and building out high-speed internet. Now, why is this so important to the Black community? Because this creates jobs, skilled jobs that make, and we want those jobs to be equitably distributed for Black women, because this creates jobs that help people move into the middle class, helps Black people move into the middle class, and also helps Black women business owners. We want them to be the contractors and provide the goods and services for all of this build out in infrastructure. And if we need certifications, we want programs to help us get those certifications so that we can get the jobs, we can get the contracting opportunities that we need. Because to build out this infrastructure, if this bill is passed, we're going to need a workforce that has workforce that is skilled and trained to provide these services. And of course, Avis, you know my passion is broadband. Mm-hmm. So building out the broadband infrastructure is so important. We've seen how critical that is just with this pandemic, because we need broadband for education. We need it for entrepreneurship, employment. So I'm really excited about hoping that this bill passes and that the broadband infrastructure is built out. So those are just a few top line things really quickly of what's in the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bill, and things that we want to see included, some that have ended up on the cutting room floor as of now, but we still want to see them included.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you were trying to jump in there, April. If you had something else to say, feel free. No? Well, that's okay. I do have a question for all of you then, because you've raised a number of very important points here around the Build Back Better bill and all the things that are in there, all the things that were in there that were taken out, all the things that might be put back in. You know, what can we do as regular old citizens to make sure that this particular bill looks like what we know it needs to look like in order to address the needs of Black women? I'd love to hear a little bit from all of you on around that perspective. I'll start with you, Carol.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I think there's a lot still left to do. One of the biggest statements around paid leave that we've been chanting for the last couple of weeks is it's not over. And it's not going to be over until the ink is dry on a law on the president's desk. And so we're going to keep fighting until that point. So what folks have been doing is, and what you should be doing is about the same. Keep it up. Keep calling your members of Congress. Keep letting them know how important paid leave is, how many people you lost during the pandemic, how many people were lost in your state or who passed away because they had to go to work, the impact that this pandemic has had on the millions of women who are now not connected to the workforce and can't be because perhaps they took time off to deal with a chronic condition and were already fired, or because of childcare, or because of some other reason. So I do think that we need to keep shaking the tree because we're getting results. You know, as yesterday we had a speak out. For 4 hours in the pouring rain, people read paid leave stories. 8 or 9 members of Congress came out to read the stories from their district. And so I think letting members of Congress understand the impact that this is having, going on social media, telling your story. Everyone has a paid leave story. Either you've had a child or you've been hospitalized, you need to take time to recover, or you're like me and had to, assist my parent through Alzheimer's and cancer treatment. We all have that story to tell. Go on social media, tell the story, tag your member of Congress. This is the moment for us to really ask them to go big. We learned yesterday in Virginia the price that we're paying for not going big and really being able to tell the story that this administration can do big things and can support working people above billionaires. So I think that's what I would suggest.
I love that, Carol. And when I hear what you have to say, it makes me think of one of my very favorite quotes from Frederick Douglass: "Power concedes nothing without demand. It never has, it never will." And that's true not only when we have quote unquote adversaries in office, it's also true when we have quote unquote friends in office. We should never give up that particular push for power. What are your thoughts around that, April?
Sure. I'll join Carol in asking everyone to pick up the phone, call your member of Congress, call your 2 senators, whether you think they support these 2 bills or not. If they are a champion, thank them, right? If they are on the fence, push them to the side to vote yay, right? The power of story and your direct activism is so critically important. They think that we are not paying attention, right? They are going to go home next August expecting us to vote for them just because we have always voted for them. We have to let them know that we are watching, that we are paying attention to what they are doing on our behalf as we send them from our communities to advocate for us in DC. So they're your elected representative. You put them there, use them, pick up the phone, call them, email them, tweet at them, right? Do whatever is best for you. And the power of story is important, right? Everybody has a story, right? You got a home care story because your auntie, your uncle, your grandmama, somebody needed care. You have a paid leave story. You have a childcare story. We have immigration stories. And it's important that we use our voices and we lift up how these policies will affect our communities. And as Carol said, we got to tie it to what happened yesterday. We are going to see people run from progressive policies because they think that is what the signal that was sent yesterday. We have to help them interpret what happened yesterday, as Carol said, is because we did not go bold enough. I think had we passed the bill already, we would have seen a different result, right? We cannot let the moderate voices take control, right? I like to say we cannot allow the loud few to overshadow the quiet many. It's time for the quiet many to roar.
I love it. And Joycelyn, if you have in just like about 1 minute or less, your thoughts, anything else to add?
Well, look, my sisters have summed it up beautifully. We vote these people into office, and we need to let them know that they're there to represent us. And if they don't represent us and what we want and our needs, we can vote you out. You're not there for life. So tell your story. Make that phone call. Don't think that it doesn't make a difference, because it does.
I love it. Well, thank you all so much for all the work that you all do each and every day to make sure that our interests are in fact heard and acted upon. Thanks so much for joining me today, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. So, wow, this has been such an amazing and powerful talk with all of these power sisters. But guess what? We have one more power sister to come up here and wrap us all out. And that is the incredible Melanie Campbell. Welcome back, Melanie.
Hello, hello, hello. I tell you, we could go another hour. And Avis, thank you. Bring Avis back. I want to talk to my sister. Bring her back up here. So Avis, I thank you for always just responding at a minute's notice. We're trying to give you at least 2 minutes notice to moderate this really critical and timely conversation today. As I had to step away, the Senate attempted to vote on the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act. And guess what? They weren't able to get it done. Why? Because the Republicans are still being obstructionist. So you had a 51-49 vote on the bill. And so again, the filibuster has to go. We have to get our voting rights passed. The thing that we know as Black women and the role that we play when it comes to Black political power in this country. We're going to have to keep fighting, but we cannot organize ourselves in the situation we find ourselves when it comes to protecting the right to vote and the ability for us to build and maintain and keep power for our communities to be able to thrive like everyone else. So I thank you and all the sisters that were on today, and thank you everyone. Thank you, Roland Martin Unfiltered, for partnering with us again today. We appreciate you helping us to tell our stories and to speak truth to power. So tomorrow, Avis will be back on Capitol Hill. We'll be there for a briefing tomorrow with Congresswoman Terry Sewell, who will be hosting a briefing for us to kind of see where things are. And then we're going to have another speak out. We've been doing this Black Women and Allies calls to action since July 15th, and we will keep going back. And we will keep coming back. Thank NCNW and all of our partners who have worked with us on this Black Women and Allies calls to action. We will continue to use all the tools that we can to organize and to keep demanding that our voting rights are protected in this country. There is no option to set it aside. So we will use every tool. We will do civil disobedience. We will, and I heard Jocelyn and some others say, we can vote you out. There is a midterm election next year, and we will do all we have to do to make sure our community's voting rights are once again restored and protected. So thank you. And also everybody listening, I'm gonna give you a number to call. I'll give you some homework if you don't mind. So get on that phone, call your U.S. senators, whether they're Democrat, Republican, or Independent, at 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121, and tell them to pass the John Lewis, because it's going to come back up again. Tell them, first of all, they need to get rid of the filibuster, remove the filibuster, change the filibuster, whatever they need to do, carve it out so that we can make sure that these bills that need to be passed are passed, and tell them to do something about that filibuster, but also to vote for the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act, the Freedom to Vote Act. Also go ahead and pass the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bills. Part of the things that you heard today is that because of gridlock and what's not happening in Washington, D.C. and the nation's capital, on Capitol Hill, I think a lot of impact did have an impact on the election yesterday. So we may be a little frustrated, maybe a little down, but we are not out of the fight. So we're going to keep on fighting and keep joining us, and go to blackwomentakaction.org to get involved in what we're doing to fight for our right to vote, and also to achieve justice in this country for our people, and save this democracy from peril. Have a good rest of your day.